Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today I'd like to continue on with a video a day, talking about a film or TV series that in one way or another, in my view, has something to do with the Halloween spirit that we find ourselves in right now, October 2020. And today I'd like to focus in on a very iconic TV series. Chances are most, if not all, of you who are watching this video right now will have heard of the series, will have seen an episode or two or three or more from this classic series, this anthology series. It is a very effective series, and many of the episodes I think can count in terms of being really eerie, really chilling. But I think in any event, these are high quality televisual dramas that tug at the heartstrings, that shock, that create a real sense of mystery and suspense, but also set forth a number of questions to do with morality and to do with life and to do with many different issues that faced the world around this time, around the early 1960s. And of course, issues that continue to be relevant and thus make this series very timeless. I'm talking about none other than this, which is the Twilight Zone. This is one of the most iconic television shows ever. I remember growing up as a kid and being able to watch little bits here and there broadcast on TV, reruns of course, but they would always be on. In other words, Twilight Zone would always be in the air. They'd be a little bit later in the night in terms of their broadcasting, but still, it was, I think, that added to the charm and the aura and the chilling effect that this kind of starkly drawn, delineated, black and white anthology series could have on a kid like me growing up. So, and my parents were really fans of this show, so whenever it was on, they'd leave the TV on and watch, and they'd let me watch as well. And if it was a scary story, I'd be just maybe really scared, or if it was a heartwarming story, because as we know, the Twilight Zone did have its share of emotionally dramatic stories that were very pleasant, as well as the surprise ending type of stories and the shock stories that were there. So if it was a really happy, lighter tone story, then I would be really pleased. Although perhaps in my own way, growing up as a kid, I'd always hope in my heart of hearts for a creepy story with a surprise twist ending of some sort, usually applied with great macabre moral a sense of morality and a sense of a twinkle in the eye that someone like Rod Serling could provide to us. So maybe as a kid growing up, I'd always be fancying those sorts of stories. But in any event, I do remember I was very fortunate to be able to have watched this from a very young age. And though I can't claim to have been able to understand everything that was going on in each of the stories, still, it was in the blood and it was in the air. So, but that continued on because this always had a certain life of its own, because these shows would always be rebroadcast or on reruns, and they'd be shown maybe on a double bill or marathons. And that was one of the ways that I grew up with this show, because when I was a kid, I spent some of my childhood years in the United States. And it was during this time that I recall being able to watch, we were living in the tri-state area of the United States. So this is the area referred to, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And so it was in this area where you'd have on TV, and I think if I remember correctly, it was over 4th of July, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe it was 4th of July and maybe New Year's, I think, as well. I'm not sure exactly, but it was, I'm pretty sure it was at least 4th of July. Please correct me for those of you who remember if my memory is a bit hazy here. But you'd have Twilight Zone marathons on TV, which was amazing. Absolutely amazing, because it would just be nonstop Twilight Zone for this holiday period that we'd find ourselves in that particular point of time. And so I remember, this is a disjointed memory, so I don't quite have the exact context, but I do have this memory of being at home and the Twilight Zone marathon was on, and I'm talking about a serious marathon, just endless, just episode after episode after, just go on and on and on. And so I want to watch as many of these episodes as possible, because during this time we didn't have Blu-ray sets like this. We didn't have, we didn't have this great access of all these discs that we do now. And so for a lot of people, I think myself included, this was probably the only way to be able to watch this Twilight Zone series episodes in a huge chunk like that. So I tried to watch as many as I could during these marathons. And so I remember my parents maybe wanting to go out and wanting to take me maybe some family excursion or something, but I'd refuse to go because I'd be urging my parents to let me stay, please let me stay and watch the Twilight Zone marathon, please, please. So it would be that kind of situation, and so I would try to watch as many as I could. I wouldn't be able to watch everything, of course, but I tried my very best. The other way that I was able to become more aware of the Twilight Zone episodes as I was growing up was through video rentals, because they were available. Not all the episodes, but a good select few were available to rent on videos that were free to rent from my local library. And through there I would just watch them over and over and over and over again, because you could rent them for free as long as you didn't return them late. And incur a late charge or anything like that. So that was another great way. And then as time progressed, of course, the DVD sets came out, and there were many of those. And then this Blu-ray set came out, which was very comprehensive, which is what I have right now. And so when I got this Blu-ray set, whenever it was, a couple years ago, perhaps a few years ago, I then just became so enamored with the series again, many years after the fact, and now I fall in love with them again. And that's one of the great beauties about this show, right? Because it is very timeless. It has that 60s feel to it, of course, and so a lot of the sensibilities, a lot of the themes, a lot of the socio-political and economic themes that were very current in 1960s Americana are, of course, very present here. And so what we're getting is in many ways a sort of slice of 60s Americana life, let's put it that way, encapsulated in many myriad forms, depending on the episode, in this series of Twilight Zone. So in many ways, it can be seen almost like maybe an anthropological endeavor in terms of watching this, a historical artifact in one sense of the term. And I mean that very positively, because it captures the essence, I think, of this period quite vividly. So there is that aspect to it. That being said, it is also incredibly timeless and universal, because I think a lot of the themes that are being dealt with are themes that are very accessible to one even now. There are certain aspects of what can be termed very fundamentally primordial ways that the teleplays themselves are constructed. They operate on very instinctual matters of fright and horror sometimes. Also, they operate on, depending on the story, very fundamental aspects of human nature. and thus creating emotional reactions that I think are very genuine and very pure, because the stories themselves elicit these kinds of responses. And speaking of the stories too, the constructions of these stories, there are many of them, of course, and so I can't claim to say that all stories are A plus level. Of course not. You're always going to get a variety of quality given a series as long of a run that this had. Of course you are. Of course you are. Especially an anthology series like The Twilight Zone. That being said, overall, it can be said with great confidence that the story constructions of this series and the episodes that were featured here specifically are really brilliant. And they create almost a masterclass, if you will, of a presentation of a lot of facts and background to ignite the story. I mean, think about it. It's amazing just how quickly all these stories are essentially just primed from the get-go, so that it doesn't take that much time at all to really get everything and get going. It's amazing, essentially, the economy of time in terms of the way things are really established and then started, ignited. So that's a really marvelous way to present a story. Plus, you have well-constructed, delineated characters that populate this space. And this is remarkable too, especially given the fact that we are given very limited time to develop, to get to know these characters, and then to see the follow-through and arc and overall conclusion that faces the characters. And so to think of all these elements, not to mention, of course, the way that the show did so much with limited resources, of course. So it did so much, even though it might not necessarily seem all the time to be, it might seem like a television produced show, right? And yet it uses those elements so effectively. And I think it's also due to the fact that the stories themselves are incredibly heightened and so vivid and so meticulously crafted and rendered. It's like it transcends any criticism that one might have, perhaps, on production value or anything. But I can't even imagine that too, because I think the production values and what they did with their resources was absolutely remarkable in the episodes. So the Twilight Zone and Rod Serling and his presence, and my goodness, that iconic voice and that iconic look, so cool, so suave, so almost enigmatic, and maybe even macabre, and as I say, a little twinkle in the eye, a wink to the audience as he gives his sermons, if you will, as master of ceremonies. My goodness, what a great show this is, The Twilight Zone. And I should say that, as I mentioned, this was the Blu-ray set, and so it has it's a comprehensive collection. So it's one of these things where you have all these discs, you open it up, and it's a fountain of discs. So my goodness, it's a really heavy thing too. So, but you get into it, and once you start, you cannot stop. It's one of those things. I suppose if I had to mention a few episodes, there are so many, too many to mention. But if I had to mention a few episodes, I could mention perhaps there are a lot of the classic, iconic ones, especially from the earlier seasons. So ones that scared me absolutely to no end when I was a kid growing up, and thus even now, were ones like the After Hours. That one really got to me. Let's see, 22. Do you remember that one? 22. That's one for season 2, according to that. Oh, that's really creepy. Even when I just recall it in my mind now, I'm just freaked out. So, and To Serve Man also, that was one of my personal favorites. I'm a big fan of that one. And the iconic ones too, like Mirror Image. Oh, that's another chilling one. And Time Enough at Last, of course, that's probably one of the most famous, most well-regarded episodes of The Twilight Zone, or episodes of classic American TV period. So that's one of the. I remember also just having such an emotional reaction to that episode too as a kid growing up, such that even now when I watch it, I have that same kind of emotional reaction to that. Wow, what a great episode. And also there's the one that I think, I'm not sure if my memory is accurate here. It could be, but one of my earliest memories, and again, this is when I was really, really young, so I'm talking about probably when I was 5 or 6 or something like that, so really young. But one of the earliest memories I have of the Twilight Zone is watching the episode of The Eye of the Beholder. The Eye of the Beholder. So I watched that episode when I was young, and the memories are hazy now, but that's one where I really remember freaking out about that when I saw that one. That freaked me out. And I suppose I don't, what should I say about that to try to be as ambiguous about it as possible. I suppose what one can say is that it's a very stylistically constructed work. Let me put it that way. So perhaps it might be signaling early on to the astute viewers as to what might be occurring. Let me put it that way. But when I was a kid, it was just, these were things that I couldn't catch, and so I went along with it, and it just became this huge thing. And all right, so you know what I'm talking about. Oh my goodness! So that's one that I will cherish for all time, because of a lot of memories that I associated with it. And speaking of the variety of the episodes, also, I mean, it's amazing to think just how varied the content is. So you can sometimes have stories that are very cerebral, and thus it takes a lot of effort. At least I feel it. I feel like it takes a lot of effort for me to try to wrap my head around some of these concepts, and especially when I was growing up, as a kid growing up, not quite getting what was going on, but still being enthralled. So, for instance, there's 5 characters in search of an exit. That's one that was really quite, for me, quite. It was like maybe a puzzle box or something like that. That you try to open it, but then it would lead to more mysteries. And so that, I feel like the episodes had that potential of playing with your mind in a playful and clever way. So and I should say also that my mother was a huge fan of the Invaders. So that was something that I grew to love through her love of the story. So, and of course, for those of you who know the series, you know that that's a classic episode as well. And I should say also that another one that really freaked me out was the Hitchhiker from early on in the run. So I'm just quite I'm talking about the show right now, and as I'm mentioning these episodes, flashes of particular scenes from each episode that I mentioned pop into my mind, such that with the creepy ones in particular, when I think about those images, it's really I'm really quite disturbed, actually. So, but I could go on with these mentioning of these episodes, but those are just a handful of the wondrous treasure trove of delights that you're going to find with the Twilight Zone. But those of you who know the show already, you know this, and so you don't need my further endorsement, because you know already that this show is amazing. You know that it is groundbreaking, and you know that it is truly out of this world. So this is the classic TV series, The Twilight Zone. Amazing stuff. So, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies and TV series. So until we meet again, thank you so much, and Cheers.